So Aditya Birla Sun Life Digital India Fund is the fund that invests primarily in technology and technology-enabled businesses. Here it is IT services plus the technology-enabled, but it's not restricted to only that as a theme. We also invest in telecom, media and entertainment, and internet businesses. So it covers IT, internet, IT-enabled businesses, media and entertainment, and telecom as a overall. Plus, we also look at outsourcing businesses. So, business services also gets covered in this investment universe. The fund also takes exposure to the international stocks. Current exposure is sub 5%, but the intent is to increase that exposure of international stocks to 10 to 12% of the portfolio over medium term. Technology is the backbone of every business, and particularly post COVID, businesses have realized the importance of investments in technology. um, IT services in particular has been a structural sector. If you look at the opportunity versus the global spend, we just scratching the surface. IT services industry at this point in time is just about $200 billion industry, while the overall spend globally on IT services more than $1.5 trillion. So that is a huge runway of growth for IT services. In the past, during multiple crisis period of Y2K, which is 2000, then the financial crisis of 2008, we have seen IT services being a lot more stickier, and Indian IT companies have pivoted successfully to new technologies and continued to gain market share and driving huge wealth creation over a longer period of time. So the value proposition of IT is intact and continues to remain strong. Second is that overall, if you look at post COVID, multiple themes or trends which are emerging are, one is because of the huge surge in activity, online activity. We most of the enterprises are undergoing a digital transformation, and usually these digital journeys or the technology upgrade cycle is a 3 to 4 year upgrade cycle. We are just in the second year of that upgradation, so the headroom for growth continues. The third most important thing on the digital theme is that if you look at the Indian ecosystem, the India's digital ecosystem has just evolved, and we are seeing huge scale up of the various startups which were called startups but now unicorns and multi-billion-dollar enterprises. So these technology slash platform companies in India, originating out of India and servicing all the Indian consumers, is one area that the digital theme, this overall digital theme is going to play out. So we are extremely positive on the IT services plus the domestic technology oriented companies which are platform companies, and we think that there is a big headroom of growth and potential returns to be made from this overall digital theme. So Aditya Birla Sun Life Digital India Fund plays this digital theme currently essentially through the IT services, where basically 60 to 70% of the exposure is to IT services. Telecom is 7 to 8%. The media entertainment is relatively smaller to about 2 to 3%. The balance, what we are seeing is the more allocation towards domestic technology slash platform companies. And over the next few years, we expect as more companies of the more domestic technology companies list on the Indian bourses, we will gradually increase exposure there. So here through Aditya Birla Sun Life Digital India Fund, you get exposure to not just the IT services, you get exposure to media, entertainment, and the domestic internet slash technology companies. So overall, this gives a good exposure to various segments of the digital theme. As we see, a digital theme is a structural theme. At the same time, because it is a sector dependent and export oriented, there is a slightly higher risk associated with the thematic funds. So one should look at a 3-year rolling return is how I would recommend, and the best way to invest in this fund is through SIP. So one can also look at tactically doing lump sum investments during times of global uncertainty, where the sector is already corrected and underperformed the broader benchmark by almost like 29 to 30%. So one can also look at doing lump sum investments over the next 6 to 8 month period. This will ensure reasonable compounded returns. The digital theme is a long-term theme, and we think that it is a structural theme. One should have it as a part of a core portfolio. In terms of the percentage of portfolio, one can look at 15 to 20% kind of a allocation to the digital theme as a whole, because the headroom for growth continues to be not just 2 to 3 years, but it is like a 8 to 10 year theme at least. The fund is managed actively and has no market cap restrictions. Um, it invests through a philosophy of growth and value. Uh, we buy companies in the mid market space which are cheaper in valuation and offers strong growth triggers. For us, the business and the management is very important. Apart from that, the third key factor we give importance is the corporate governance and the cash flows. So a combination of all these four factors define the stock picking for us. When we look at the fundamental trends, we think that there are three key drivers that are driving the demand revival for the IT sector. One is that the modernization of the core infrastructure. Every enterprise across vertical is looking towards modernizing their core IT infrastructure. That is one. Second is that adoption of the public and hybrid cloud model. So cloud as a theme, I think we've reached only 25% of workload migration towards cloud. So there is a strong headroom of growth which continues. That is the second theme. The third is the cyber security and the AI adoption. I think that is another area which is where all enterprises are driving increased spends, and overall Indian IT companies have pivoted successfully to all these new technology areas to cater to the clients. That is driving a strong demand revival for the sector as a whole. So the digital ecosystem in India is exploding, and particularly post COVID, we have seen a massive adoption of various Indian technology platforms. So if you look at getting food delivered at home, or ordering medicines online, if I have to look for a insurance policy, I can sitting at my desk I can find out the available policies in the market. If you look at arranging meetings online, so the whole adopt ecosystem in India has taken a strong leapfrog going forward. And in the last 2 years we have seen some of these companies getting listed on the Indian stock exchanges. We already have started taking exposure to some of these companies. Going forward, as more companies in this ecosystem get listed on the stock exchanges, you will see higher and higher allocation towards such companies. So far, the Aditya Birla Sun Life Digital India Fund has benefited out of company IT services companies which are catering to the global clients, global client base. Going forward, you will see higher allocation to companies which are actually catering to the Indian citizens, and that is where we will have you will see some higher allocation towards Indian technology companies. This being a thematic fund is always exposed to the sectoral risk. IT is a global sector, and hence any events happening at a global level could impact the performance of the sector, and hence this fund. Like in this year, earlier this year, we had Russia-Ukraine war starting, and which is where there was a impact at a global growth level, and we are seeing the repercussions currently in terms of rising inflation, the interest rate hikes across the developed markets, which are like unprecedented, right? So that has impacted the sector's performance and in turn the fund's performance. During such times, we tend to increase the exposure towards large caps, because large caps have a better resilience to better ability to manage revenue as well as margins and cash flows, and take any of the global shocks. During these times, we have increased exposure to large caps, so we tend to modify the market cap allocation according to the volatile environment at a macro level. Among my learnings managing this fund is about, one is right allocation. Picking a stock is one thing, but having a right allocation to the stock, not having enough allocation to the stock, doesn't add that much value, versus having a right allocation to a right stock creates decent alpha for the fund. My second learning has been in terms of riding the full uh, re-rating of a stock. So buying a stock early enough is important, but I think riding through the journey of not just the earnings growth, but valuation upward re-rating, which essentially drives a multi-bagger return. So holding the stock for long term and not selling it early just because it has risen by 50% or 100% is something that is the second learning. Let us look at the current scenario. What is important is that post COVID there has been a COVID induced accelerated spends on the technology side, and in the past what we have always seen is that every crisis has brought huge opportunity for the Indian IT companies, be it in the year of 2000 post Y2K, be it post the GFC. We have seen outsourcing increasing, and in particular offshoring increasing, which has benefited the Indian IT companies in a significant way. Currently, post COVID again, we saw 2 years of very strong growth, and that was well reflected in the kind of PE re-rating and huge stock returns for the Indian IT companies in the last 2 years, until say earlier this year, until Feb to 2022. The current slowdown at this point in time is of course has impacted the overall sector performance. However, we see this as a near-term bump in terms of a long-term growth story. Uh, we are in a technology upgrade cycle where basically this current slowdown would mean an interim bump only, and we would see stronger growth once the global growth again picks up. Uh, Three fundamental trends which continue to drive the growth for Indian IT will be cloud. The adoption on cloud is at very early stage. That is one. Second is that areas like cyber security, artificial intelligence, IoT, we are becoming core spend areas for most of the clients. That's second. And the third is that one of the lead indicators that we look at is also the growth in the hyperscalers. So be it AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, they continue to see strong growth, and which is in the tech value chain they are ahead, and which drives growth for the services player later on. So I think all these tend towards all these combined continue to make us very positive on the sector over a longer term period. So I would just recommend that be invested, add on to your investments, and continue to benefit out of the digital theme.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.